Hey, welcome back to the Marianne Hickman Show. Listen, if you've been with us for a while, I'm so glad you're here. I'm so glad I'm providing enough really cool guests for you to want to be around and to stick around, and you're getting enough value to make this a recurring thing for you to listen to. There's a few podcasts that I do that with, and if this is one for you, thank you. I'm honored. I love bringing you just world class guests. I love making introductions through podcasting of amazing people that I meet that I want to introduce to the world and put a megaphone up to their mouth. And listen, if you're brand new to the Marianne Hickman Show, welcome. Welcome to this community. Welcome to this group of people. We're all trying to get better at speaking. We're all trying to get better at pushing our message out to the world. We're all trying to get better at serving the people who need the talents that we have been blessed with. And today is no different. Andrew Matthews is on the show today. You see me keep glancing down. I'm hugely distracted by his book. There's 7 million copies of this thing sold, by the way. He first published it in 1988, and it's been reprinted in over 42 languages. This is such an incredible book, and I loved reading the testimonials at the front because there's people in the Philippines that are saying this saved my life. There's psychiatrists saying this has changed things forever. There's people saying I was born in 1988, but I really started living after I started reading this book, and it's really thin. It's really simple. It's a book that's going to be part of our kids' curriculum for our homeschool. But Andrew, and when you meet him in this episode, I bet you're going to fall in love with his message just like I did. And this isn't a complicated message. And I would dare say this isn't even a new message. People have been trying to learn to be happy since the beginning of time. But Andrew packages it in such a beautiful and unique way with his own illustrations, by the way. And it's just an honor to have him on the show. If you know me, you know I want to bring you the people that fascinate me, the people that teach me something new. I learn something new in every podcast recording, and this one was no different. So if you like what you hear, do me a favor, throw it in the comments. Let me know if there's a gold nugget for you in this one. If you're listening in the sauna, if you're listening on your run, if you're listening while you're in the car, when you're done listening, if you have a moment to just pull over and leave us a comment, that helps me know what kind of guests to bring on, and it helps me know what to give you more of. Because if you know me, you know that I want to bring you the most power per minute on this show. So I hope you enjoy this episode, and I'll be looking for you in there. Andrew, thank you for joining me all the way from Australia, 3 a.m. tomorrow, where you are.
It's my pleasure, Marianne.
I've just been doing a little bit of cheating and reading and all that. I don't like to come to any podcast knowing everything about you because I like to just feed my natural curiosity. But I have to just say, for anyone that's listening, you're a 70 country, 42 language published author, millions of books all over the world. The illustrations are all your own. Is that right?
Yes, I was
And you've been
drawing.
on a
Yeah, I was drawing long before I was writing. So I knew I could illustrate a book. I just wasn't sure if I could write one.
Oh my goodness. Well, you've proven that to be, nothing to worry about. And you've started a publishing company with Julie, is that right?
Yes, so my first book was published by a little publisher in Singapore, and that publisher, their previous book was actually the Vanuatu Telephone Directory. Um, a tiny island in the Pacific, which you may not have been to or heard of. But they did a great job with my first two books, and then my wife, who is a uh, energetic, courageous, extraordinary lady. We've been married 34 years.
Congratulations. That's
Thank you.
wonderful.
Thank you. Julie said to me in 1995, would you like me to be your publisher and we will go global? And she has well and truly kept to that promise. And so now we're in, yes, 49 languages. She did the rights deal with Azerbaijan last week. And
Oh, congrats.
so, yeah, it's been an extraordinary journey to be taking this message of happiness to so many languages and countries.
Hey, what's up? Marianne Hickman here. Listen, I'm interrupting my own show because I want to give you something. Now,
You guys all want to get on more stages. I've got a free resource for you of stages that are just clamoring for guests. They need guests on a daily, weekly, sometimes monthly basis. This is my podcast database. Now, what I'm going to do is have you go to mariannehickman.com/database. Once you put in your information there, I'm going to send this to you totally for free. Open up this database. You're going to click through it, find the next podcast that's relevant to your topic, hit the application button, show up on their podcast, get in front of their people, and share your content. Remember, mariannehickman.com/database. Let's get you unlocked. Well, I think what you're doing is so powerful. I always feel like you kind of said this, and maybe it was in the emails that I was reading, or maybe we talked about it, but the information that you're sharing isn't new information. I don't think any of us really have any new information to the world necessarily, but a lot of information is new to us, even though it has existed in the world for a while. So what it looks like that you're doing, and what I have experienced that you're doing, is providing this this rebound formula, for lack of a better word, to people who have never heard it before in countries and languages all over the world. You're doing so much good by speaking on stages. And when I invite people to the show, I really like to not only understand the message and the why behind the message, but also a couple of the things on the technical side of how to get the message in front of more people more often. But before we do that, we need to understand, what is your message? What inspired your message? Why? And where have you gone with it? Your backstory is so it's so multifaceted. From excuse me, from the rejections from your book, which, you're right up there with Dyson and Walt Disney and, Colonel Sanders, trying and trying and trying until finally something catches. Growing up as the smallest kid in your school and everything that comes with that. I know I can relate to that. To the journey with your stepson and his accident. Like, you've had many opportunities to rebound. I'll say that.
So I guess my story with the books began at 25. I made this shocking discovery. I discovered that the happiest people I knew had bigger problems than me, and suddenly I had no excuse. I came
Mm.
across people who were dealing with cancer that had a better attitude than me. I came across people who had lost their jobs, or families that had lost loved ones way too soon, that were dealing with massive setbacks way better than I was. I met a family whose house had burned down. They were the happiest family I ever met. I thought, this makes no sense. I thought that when my life got easier, I would become happier. And so suddenly I was thrust into this journey of trying to figure out, how is it that happy people think, and how can I be a bit more like them? So I read 200 books on being happy and the subconscious and attitude, and just trying to figure out, what is it? And
200? Wait, 200 books?
yeah,
How long did that take you?
it took me a couple of years. Um,
Oh my goodness.
but you know, here's the thing. I had figured that I would be a reasonably happy person with a good life. At 25, I thought my life is probably a third over already, and I'm not doing very well.
Wow.
Romance, not that good. Money in the bank, not a lot. Am I enjoying my work? Not that much. I thought, I don't need to be doing this anymore. And so as I began to figure out some things that were helpful for me, I thought, maybe if I can put this in a book, a simple book, maybe there's other people that have been missing some of these keys, if you like. And maybe if I can put some ideas in a book, even for people who don't even like self-help books. So if I can add cartoons to it, if I can keep the language simple. See, when I began writing, self-help books were mainly devoured by insurance salesmen and maybe
Really?
CEOs. This is 1988. And so I'm thinking, if I can write a simple, entertaining book on how to live a better life, then maybe I can reach a college student, or a mother of three, or some guy who works in the post office. He doesn't want to be a billionaire. He just wants to be happier. And so after a lot of rejections, being happy began to, firstly was published and then began to get traction around the world. And suddenly it was going into Spanish and German and Chinese, and we were away. And we don't necessarily need information that is new, but we need to be reminded very often. And so you hit the nail on the head. I'm perhaps a packager of information.
Yeah, I like what you said there. There's value to that. In fact, there's an entire religion that has the nickname of the packager of the information. I don't know if you're familiar with the LDS Church or the Mormons, in other words.
Yes,
That guy's just a packager of information. He was just the aggregator of all the information. And there's a lot to be said about that. A lot to be said about going out there, searching out, finding the best, adding to it your own experiences, and then making it digestible for the rest of us. And something that's fun to read, simple to read, rereadable. And clearly that has been not only successful in terms of growth for you in all the countries and languages that it's been in, but I'm sure you get emails and Instagram messages all the time about the content from your book changing lives.
the extraordinary thing, and I never ever counted on this or expected it, but almost every day still I get an email or a message from somebody, from a boy in Vietnam who says, I used to hate myself and I
Mm.
did badly in school and I read your book and now I'm toward the top of the class and life is wonderful. Or from a lady in Singapore who's she was sick and broke, and she and her husband were living with her parents in this tiny apartment, and she said, I went to the doctor and I read the first 7 pages of your book that was on the coffee table before he called me in, and I thought, I've got to get hold of that book. And she borrowed the money because she was $100,000 in debt. But suddenly
Wow.
she had a new fire in her belly, and she saw a message on Facebook that said, somebody wanted to buy 10 serves of chicken rice for $3 a serve. She thought, I can cook that. And so she cooked it. She started cooking for other people in the tiny kitchen of her parents' apartment. She said, now I own a catering company and a bakery and a
Oh my
restaurant.
gosh.
She said, I'm a multi-millionaire. And I went to eat. She has a restaurant, Nush Noodle Bar, on the Singapore Esplanade, prime real estate. And Julie and I went and ate in her restaurant, and she burst into tears, and it was just extraordinary.
What impact? I think for a lot of speakers, there's this duality. A lot of speakers, a lot of coaches, we have this duality of number one over here, we want to drive impact. We want stories like that. We want to be able to say, I left a mark on the planet that made it a better place, not for self aggrandizing reasons, not for our own ego. Part of us just wants to know that we did some good, right? And then there's this other part of us that overlaps quite a bit, but this other separate part of us that says, I need to keep the lights on. I need to feed my family. I need to make a business out of whatever it is I'm doing. I've got to keep the money coming in. And sometimes business can be really hard when you're a coach and those two worlds struggle to overlap. They struggle to collide. And what you're describing with this lady with the catering, and it started with fulfilling an order, for lack of a better word, on Facebook, an indirect order at that, into building a multi-million-dollar business and a catering company and a restaurant that you can go to. There has to be a blend of those two where I'm able to give back and fulfill what I want to do for all of the altruistic reasons. And I want to be able to sustain my own family doing this. You know, where do you
Yes.
see those colliding? Does this have anything to do with the content of your book? I'm just curious your perspective on it.
Well, if we look at what I learned from it, having been in this for 35 years now, It is that if you are the speaker or the creator, you do your very best in the moment. You create your very best product, and you do everything you can to make it beautiful and entertaining and simple and empowering. And somewhere, sometime, you reach people who take on that message, for whom that is just what they're waiting to hear. And then you hear back from them. But for those of us who sometimes say, when is it all going to happen? Or how do I know what I should be doing? You do what is right under your nose. Whatever you can do, you do it. And Umi Abdullah, who was the lady who created this big company in Singapore, she started in the only place she could. And that's a lesson for all of us. We sometimes, perhaps if we're an author or a speaker, we look at somebody else and we say, well, if I had a crowd like Tony Robbins, then I'd really put on a show. But I've only got 11 people, so I'm waiting for something bigger to happen. You've got to work with those 11 people.
So we do judge ourselves, and we do wait. And you talk about this in your happiness principles too. We wait for the thing. We wait for this made up benchmark in order to put our best selves out there. We either wait for the big numbers and compare ourselves to Tony Robbins, or we wait for the big event to happen, wait for the wedding day, or wait for the relationship, or wait for the number in the bank account to be there before we can be happy. And I don't know if you've seen this movie, but there is a movie called it's from the fairy tales of Mother Goose, right? So Puss in Boots from Mother Goose. There's this movie that's been made about Puss in Boots called The Last Wish, and there is a little dog character in this movie. I don't know if you've seen this. Have you seen this?
No.
Oh, okay. I'll briefly recap the story because it I think leads into your content very well. There's the story of this little Chihuahua dog, and his name is Pepito, which I think means little puppy in Spanish. And he's recounting these stories of his childhood when he used to play hide and seek, and his friends would, not find him for minutes, hours, sometimes even days. And as we listen to him tell this story, we start to have so much compassion for him because we realize from the listener's perspective that he's being neglected and emotionally abused. And then but he's telling the story with a smile. And he said, we played hide and seek so well one day that I hid in a sock and they put a rock in it and then tied it up and threw it in the river. And they couldn't find me they never found me. We're still playing. And the rest of us are thinking, oh my gosh, what they tried to kill you. This is terrible. And our jaws are on the floor. And that when he's done telling the story, the other characters say, are you okay? Like, this is awful that this happened to you. We're so sorry. And he said, why? I got a new sweater and I have a great story. He's wearing the sock that he was drowned in as a sweater because he poked holes in it or whatever. He said, I have a fabulous story. It's a brand new sweater. What's not to love? And it makes
Yeah.
me think of this rebound principle, because we will all go through something when, quote unquote, as they say, life happens. It's going to happen one way or the other. It's going to be in some ways maybe easier than we thought, but in many, many other ways, it's our worst nightmare. And God forbid, right? I'm not wishing this on anybody, but I do want, at least for me and the people that are listening to you, to be prepared for when those moments happen. And Alex Hormozy talks about this. He talks about the peaks that we experience and then the valleys that we experience. And when we get to that valley, when it gets dark, when it gets to the point where it feels like there's no hope, and it feels like there's no way out, and it feels like we have no choice, one of those two things can happen. One is we keep going down, and the other is we decide we've hit rock bottom and we rebound and we start climbing back up. And that's the message I keep getting from your books. In fact, I just ordered it. It's going to be at my house very soon, thanks to Amazon. But this rebound, I want to lean into how do you see the rebound? How do you prepare for a rebound? How do you teach us? Just teach us.
In terms of happiness, we need to understand that happiness is very much a decision we make. For example, we've all seen 2-year-olds, toddlers playing on the furniture. This 2-year-old is playing on a chair. He falls on his head. The first thing he does is he looks around to see who's watching. And based on the audience, he decides, am I going to laugh or cry? And we think that's really cute. What we may not realize is that we do the same thing. We're out on the freeway, someone cuts in front of us, and we make an instant decision. Is this going to ruin my day? We're always choosing, am I going to be upset by this, or is this not even going to faze me? So in so many ways, happiness is a decision that we make many times a day. In terms of rebounding and bouncing back, there are a number of things, and that's why I came to write this book, Bouncing Back, because I wanted to investigate what is it that resilient people do and how can we be more like them. And the big thing that resilient and happy people do is very soon after a disappointment or a disaster, they accept it and they say, I wouldn't have chosen this, but now I move on to what I want. And it's perfectly normal. If life knocks us down or people let us down, we don't get the promotion that we thought that was ours. Um, our fiance dumps us, or we break our leg, and the first reaction is going to be, why me? Why now? Just when I thought that life was going okay. But soon enough, we need to get it out of this idea that, well, it shouldn't have happened. And we say, okay, now I'm dealing with this, and understand that acceptance is power. And so I've got a cartoon early on in Bouncing Back, and there's a guy climbing a mountain, and he looks exhausted and he's sweating. Even his dog is unhappy and exhausted. And they're climbing this mountain. The caption is, what you thought was breaking you is probably making you. And
Mm.
so often it's those things that we least wanted that turn us into the kinds of people that we really want to be. The other thing that we can realize is that most disasters are not total disasters. That even little disasters, like you're at the airport, you're waiting for your flight, and then suddenly the sign comes up that says your flight is cancelled and your next option is in 7 hours' time. Our first reaction is, oh, this is terrible. Well, this is the last thing I need. But isn't that the day that you meet a lifelong friend because you were 7 hours in the airport? Or you meet somebody who think is going to be your forever partner, and everything is wonderful, and they dump you, and you meet that person in 15 years' time, and you breathe a sigh of relief, and you think, I dodged a bullet. Um, so very often life teaches us in extraordinary ways, and so the first step to being happier or to rebounding is acceptance. And part of that can be having some kind of perspective where we ask ourselves, has anyone else ever survived this? Am I the first person in history to have a problem this serious? And
Probably
and
not.
maybe we, so that helps in terms of coming to terms with a disappointment or a disaster.
I like what you're saying, and I'm glad you brought up the word resilience because I've heard this definition of resilience, and I'm kind of hypothesizing on it myself. I'm experimenting on it myself. And the definition that I heard was resilience can be measured by how fast you bounce back from whatever is given to you. Because you're right, we wouldn't choose those things. We normally don't choose those things. So it's typically given to us or thrust upon us, in other words. But I've also been wondering with how fast we bounce back, where is there room for sadness? Is there room for sadness? Where is there room for what emotions we would deem as negative, is there a place for those? Do they serve us in some way or another? Because it almost seems sociopathic if there's a tragedy in your life to just say, well, I guess it's just a blessing in disguise. If there's some actual real, not a perceived tragedy, but an actual tragedy. I'm not talking about missing a flight. I'm talking about the death of a loved one. Is there room for that? And how do you walk through that?
We all grieve differently, but we need to go through the grieving process if we've been terribly hurt or disappointed. I had long conversations with my friend George, who's a psychiatrist, when I was writing Bouncing Back, and we may take the analogy. You take a soldier who returns from um, a theatre of war, and he's lost um, his buddies, he's lost loved ones, and he needs to grieve. And if he doesn't grieve, and if he doesn't go through that healing process, then he might find that he's medicating with alcohol and drugs and just to get through his life. And and his life is not going to work until he goes through that grieving and that healing process. And we are the same. So whatever it is that has hurt us or torn us apart, it's critical that we go through that grieving process. If we've lost someone, um, different people go through the grieving process differently. I mean, I know of people, for example, who will cook their loved one's favorite dinner and just sit with a glass of wine and enjoy that meal alone, but just with all those happy memories. And some people go for long walks. Some people like to have a party every year and invite everyone who knew their wife or their husband, and they just get together and celebrate the life of this loved one that they no longer have. And so we will all uh, grieve and heal differently, but it's still something that we need to do. But I
How do you
like the
know
idea.
when Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was wondering how you know the difference between grieving that serves, that helps us, living in the valley of the shadow of death, as they say in the Bible, right? Or walking through it. Where's the difference between walking through it and unpacking your bags and setting up camp there to the point where it's detrimental? I've seen people who feel like they're betraying. We'll keep with this example of a lost loved one. I think that's relevant to a lot of people. But I have seen and known people very, very close to me whose lives have been disrupted so much by the grieving process that it's now robbing them of a future. I have seen people who feel like if they don't stop staying in the low point of the grieving, that it somehow dishonors the person that they love. And I watch as their happiness continues to be stolen by the event. And I watch people who have encountered the worst of circumstances, whether it's abuse or very, very real trauma, who carry that abuse and trauma with them as if to say, if I let this go in some way, then it somehow gives permission to the abuser to do it again, or it's somehow they're maybe afraid that they will reinvite it if they stop mourning it. What's the pivot point? When is the point where we bounce off the bottom? How do we know?
You raise a good point, and I think everybody will do it differently. But from the beginning, I really like the idea of celebrating the life of the person we've lost, um, because then we're leaning into gratitude, and gratitude serves us. People say, what's the big deal with gratitude? Because you can't be grateful and miserable at the same time. You can't be grateful and
Mm.
angry at the same time. Um, So the more that we can lean toward gratitude for the person that we had. I mean, I don't think for any moment, if we lose somebody, And I have this idea that maybe the people that we lose, wherever they are, they have a more elevated perspective than we have. So I don't think for a moment that they're hoping that we're going to be miserable for 1 second. I think
That's a
I
good
think the
point.
people that we love who pass on, they just can't wait to see us happy. I even think that, you know, um, I, I think that the people who pass on would be happy for us to be happy with, you know, a new partner, because they just have an elevated perspective that life is meant to be joyful. Um, so the more that we can live with gratitude for what we've had, and that children's book that said, don't be sad that it's over, be happy that it happened. That's a great philosophy.
I like that. It reminds me of, gosh, so many experiences that I've had where I adopted this kind of flip the script language from a friend of mine on social media. She said, "My kids are allowed to complain all they want, as long as after they complain, they say, but at least, and then look for something good. I was late for school, but at least I have shoes. I tripped and fell and skinned my knee, but at least I was wearing a helmet," or something like that. I like what you said about gratitude can't possess the same space. We have to choose one or the other. And gratitude,
Yeah,
it can't share. It takes
yeah,
over. And this feeling of
yes,
gratitude, I've studied lots of vibrational frequencies. I don't know if you've looked at this with, actual traceable, measurable vibrational frequencies. It starts with the natural vibrational frequency of maybe your desk or the vibration of water or whatever it is. Well, energies, if you have the right instrument, can be measured. And based on the research that I have done, gratitude carries the highest vibrational energy of all of the emotions that you can possibly experience. And it really brings up like this elevated plane that you talk about. Maybe we can taste it a little bit. Maybe we can experience a little bit of this higher plane that our loved ones have passed on to, or that we may one day experience if we pass on, and so forth. But how do you choose? It's hard. I have done a lot of personal development work over the last few decades. I'm not arrived by any means, but I've spent some time
yeah,
in the classroom.
yeah,
I know that maybe you've experienced this too. Sometimes we go on this journey of personal development and we choose happiness when it sometimes doesn't make sense to other people, but it works very well for us. And there are people in our lives, in our family, in our relationships, in our social and religious circles who haven't done that. And they find it very, very hard to quickly choose gratitude, or at least by our judgment of quickly. Maybe they never do. And yet we share a space with them. And I don't know about you, but I have found it hard to not be what could be perceived as preachy, or, I want to be a good influence to this person. I don't want to absorb their negativity, but I'm choosing to share a space, but the energy doesn't mismatch. Is that making sense? Am I explaining it in a way that makes sense? This feeling?
absolutely. Yes. So you're touching on a few issues. Like one is, there's going to be people in our life who are like we were at some point, who just aren't ready to be happy. And people will often say, "How can I make my husband happy?" And I say, "Forget it. You can't make someone else happy. They've got to be ready, and when they're ready, they start doing the kinds of things that can make them happier." And one of the big things is it's in the questions that we ask ourselves. What do I love about my husband? What do I like about this job, even though my boss isn't perfect? What do I love about this country, even though my country has some problems? What's good about today? Why am I happy that I even woke up this morning? And we find
Mm,
in life what we look for. The other thing about having people in our space who aren't as happy as they could be, or as we would like them to be, I think we can serve them by, like your friend, or like you were talking about, the lady who says, when you complain, then finish the sentence by, but at least I was wearing a helmet. Um, so we can serve those people by limiting the amount of time that we allow them to complain, and perhaps encourage them to, if they're trying to solve a problem, then let's help them solve a problem. But if it's just for the sake of complaining, then we say that's not serving you. One of the interesting things about complaining and happiness is we all appreciate that what we talk about, uh, or what we think about, we tend to talk about. If I think about food, then I will talk about food. But the other side of it, the reverse is true, that what we talk about, we tend to think about. If I'm complaining about my job throughout the day, then I'm thinking about the job that I hate when I'm not talking. And so that is making me miserable. And so it doesn't serve us to complain, and it doesn't serve us to allow those in our orbit to complain once they've perhaps said to us, I need some help with a problem. But beyond that, we encourage them to talk about other things. And if we have family members who are constant complainers, then we need to consciously look for people in our life who can uplift us to balance that.
I think that you're touching on a very powerful principle of proximity. Whoever we share this airspace with, I think of it this way. If we're in the room with someone and we spend a lot of time with them digitally or physically, then all of our mental thoughts, it's like they're all in a pool and we're all drinking from everything that we contributed. So if we're not getting enough of it, it's not to say that, well, I don't know. I was listening to Ed Milet on his podcast, and he said, if you have someone's name come to mind when I say, I need to spend less time around this negative person, then you probably should spend less time around that negative person. But maybe it's your spouse, which is really challenging. Or maybe it's an aunt or an uncle or someone that you work with that you're forced to spend this time with. But you bring up a really good point of seek out relationships where you want to spend time, even if you're quote unquote forced to be in proximity by whatever choices you made. Seek out people who increase your vibrational state where gratitude is abundant, and maybe send those people a message. In fact, if there's a name that comes to mind when we say that, send them a text message and say thank you for being in my world, or again express this gratitude. I always like to do some kind of an action when I have an inspiration thought like that. You mentioned that acceptance is the first step. And Mel Robbins agrees with you. I know I'm name dropping a lot, but I've just been reading and studying a ton. And I want to give credit where credit is due. Mel Robbins says if you have to do something that you don't like, admit that it sucks for a moment and then do it anyway. I know that push ups suck, but I'm going to do them anyway. I know running on the treadmill, it's painful. I don't like it, but I'm going to do it anyway. So, this first step of acceptance is a powerful tool. What happens? What's the next step after I've accepted whatever has happened, whether it's getting cut off on the freeway or losing a job or some more traumatic event? What comes after acceptance?
Then we don't try and deal with this tragedy all at once, or this disappointment. So, for example, if you're climbing a mountain and you get stuck on a ledge, then suddenly all of your focus goes into getting yourself off that ledge. You're not worried about all the bills that you've got to pay in the next month or everything that could go wrong in the next year. You're just dealing with the next 5 minutes. And that's the most powerful way to deal with a serious problem or a setback. And so what we notice about resilient people is that they don't get hung up on fixing the whole of their life or everything that's going to go wrong in the next month, but they say, let me just deal with today. And when it's really difficult, they say, let me deal with the next hour or the next 5 minutes. So we break it down into little bits that we can manage. And so suddenly we're not overwhelmed by this thing. And you do your best until bedtime. And when tomorrow comes, you get up and you do the same thing.
I relate to that so much. I wish I had your book when I was going through my divorce. Oh my goodness. I had to figure this out all on my own. And I remember those moments, Andrew, when I'm sitting in my room all alone, My kids are gone because now I have to share weekends, and that's everything I didn't want. And the divorce is still going through its legal battles, and I keep having to interface, and it keeps getting hard, and there's expenses with it that I don't feel prepared for, and this single mom is looming over my head, and what am I going to do? I remember this principle that you're talking about of breaking it down into smaller chunks, and sometimes, Andrew, I could only do 3 seconds. I that
Yeah.
that was the cap. I said, "I know I can count to 3, and maybe I can do it again, but I don't know. I'm just gonna get through the next 3 seconds."
So that, I mean, as tough as it was, you did make it through, and you made it through by just narrowing your focus. And we all need to do that at different times, and you did. So, yeah, that's the only way we can make it when life is just a real bastard.
Speaking plainly, I totally agree. So, acceptance
Yeah.
and then bite size, how did you put that? These bite size, what can I
Just
do's?
breaking it down into bite-sized chunks. Do your best until bedtime, and when it's too tough, break it down into 5 minutes, or in your case, 3 seconds. And
It was rough.
and you can do that. And then the next part of the recipe is that we need a vision for a better life. We become what we think about, and so everything that is good that can happen to us, we have to see in our mind first. If we want to be more confident, has to be a picture in our mind before we can be more confident. If we want to be in a happy relationship, it happens first in your thoughts. More money in the bank happens first in your mind. Even just happiness. Happiness begins as an idea. I could be happier than I am now. So we need to have that vision where we imagine a better life. And so uh, in bouncing back, I talk about 7 things that resilient people do. But if we look at those 3 keys, is number 1 is acceptance. That's the starting point. Number 2 is breaking it down into little chunks that we can manage. And number 3 is have a vision for a better life.
I used to
And
do vision boards
that's what
more.
gives it, sorry, that's what gives
No,
us
no,
hope.
please.
Yeah,
Uh,
and
uh,
so all that adds up to is suddenly we have hope, and if we have hope, then we can manage about anything.
I like that word hope. It's come up a lot in a lot of movies that I watch. Um, the antagonist in the movie, if they're really smart antagonists, they don't go for the obvious hit, they go for the elimination of hope. I feel like when that is the biggest thing. If you have hope, then that is the stem cell of every creation that you could possibly imagine. And the conversely, if you don't have it, that's the difference. I think that's the difference between when you bounce back up and when you keep going down is that is there hope for a better future? Can you see yourself in a better future? Have you practiced visualizing it? I used to back in the day when I first started going to seminars, I had a vision board taped to my wall and I would cut out pictures from magazines back when I still had magazines and I would stick them on the wall. Just it's just full on. It was very analog, very messy, but I would I one time, I have to tell you this. I wanted a new washer and dryer. I was broke as a joke, but I wanted a front-loading washer and dryer. So I found one in a magazine. I probably took it from my dentist's office. I cut it out, stuck it to the wall, and I stared at that. Just stared at it and I practiced opening the doors with my hands and what it would feel like to load my laundry in the front rather than through the top. And I remember the day that I pulled that down from my vision board because I got it. Because I had practiced this and I visualize it. And it seems trivial. Andrew, I don't know if you run into this, but there are people that push back against this idea of visualizations and gratitude because they're like, I don't believe in all this woo-woo stuff. I don't believe in all this invisible jargon or whatever you think it might be. And I have noticed and maybe you have too, that the people that say, I don't believe in this woo woo stuff are not always the happiest people.
Yeah, And conversely, you never see someone win like a Masters golf tournament or win an Oscar who don't say at some point, "I saw this. I was 10 years old and I imagined this, and I've got pictures and posters on my wall, and I've been living this dream in my imagination my whole life." And we become what we think about. We move toward those those pictures and those visions. And so it is the people who have a hard time believing that there is magic in visualization. Those are the people who really struggle because they don't have the hope. And I guess in a sense they don't want to be disappointed, so they don't want to try it, or maybe they tried it for a week or so and their life didn't change. But it needs to be a daily habit that we see where we're going, and some things take a long time, but
Yeah, the law of
often when it,
gestation teaches us that.
yeah, but I'm glad you brought this idea of sticking pictures on your wall of where you're going. I did it once. I was early in the piece, like you. I was driving this rotten old car, and I had a friend say to me, "Why don't you get a decent car?" So I thought to myself, okay, I'm going to get a BMW, and I'd seen this model, and I I put a picture of a red BMW on my wall, and about but I didn't tell. No one came to my. It was just like an office in my best desk in my bedroom. No one ever came to it. And about 4 months later, a guy said to me, "You should get a new car." And I said, "Yeah, I'm planning to." And he said, "Well, I saw a good car that you'd like in a lot in Franklin Street." And I said, "What is it?" He said, "It's a red BMW." And I went and saw that
Wait, so he
car,
hadn't seen the
and
picture?
he hadn't seen the picture. No one knew, but he just happened to say, "I saw a car that would suit you," and I went and looked at it and I bought it. It was just in my $10,000. It cost $10,000. Um, and yeah, extraordinary. So yeah, lots of stories like that.
It's oh man, I don't think this stuff can be overrated. And I know listeners listening to this, it's probably not the first time that they've heard of these ideas of resilience through acceptance and then taking bite-sized chunks and then visualizing where you want to go. You probably have heard about vision boards before. You've probably heard about meditation before. But I'm a firm believer it's like taking a shower. One doesn't cover us for our entire lives. We have to do it over and over again.
We need to be reminded in a way that works for us. And sometimes if we have a picture or a story, or we see a cartoon, and then that, it's like we all know that we should exercise and we should eat better, but for the most part, we don't to the extent that we should. And then we hear a podcast, or we see someone on TV, or we read a book, and it is explained in a way that makes perfect sense. And we can't ignore it anymore. And then we do that. And maybe we do that for the next year or the next 6 months. And then we need to hear another podcast or another book that is going to re-enthuse us to do the stuff that we already know we should do. So we don't need new information very often. We just need to be reminded in a way that will engage us, enthuse us, excite us.
So when you work with people, I love that you said that because so many times I'm sure you get this. I get it from time to time too. When you put a piece of content out there and it's been out for a while, but then you get the email, you get the note that said, "That's exactly what I needed today. Thank you." That's just,
Mm.
man, if I can just put a pin in everybody's hat, visualize that. That's going to drive your impact, like we talked about earlier, this impact versus business. When you're in business, Andrew, and you're serving the people that you serve, do you find that more people come to you for the training and happiness that you've written your books on? Or do you find more people are coming to you for, "I need help publishing," or "I need help getting on different languages," or spreading my message? How do you help people the most when they work with you directly?
The two major things I do is I write books, which my wife Julie then gets into lots of different languages, um, and so I see that my mission, and you spoke earlier about we all want to be making the world a better place, and so that is how I seek to do it. Um, just just by writing books like Being Happy or Bouncing Back that are entertaining and simple, and whether you're a brain surgeon or whether you're in a maximum security prison, you can read that book and you can say, I can do some of these things. And then as a result of that, I get invited to speak at conferences, and they tend to like this guy who draws cartoons on stage on a big flip chart. And I always think that things work for us when people talk about being authentic. But in terms of being a speaker and presenter, people don't expect you to be perfect, but they do love it when they see that you are doing something that is really something that is a joy for you. And I was drawing cartoons of my teachers when I was 6, and I've never stopped. And and so the chance to create uh, pictures on stage, and I always make sure I start at the most um, unexpected point, so they never know what it's going to be until the whole thing is finished. And it may only take me a minute to draw this picture, but so it's connecting messages with cartoons. So those are the two major things that I do. When people come to me and say, "How do you end up getting published or how do you write a book?" I say, "Write one page a day. That's it." I had a guy. I'd spoken at the University of Science and Technology in Hong Kong, and at the end of the line, there was several hundred people that bought books that evening. And he was the last guy. He was so broke he couldn't even buy a book. So he was sort of
Oh,
apologetic. Um, and he said to me, "How do you write a book?" And I said, "Just write one page a day. And after 3 months, you've got a manuscript." Well, I didn't hear from him for another 15 years, and I got an email
15
from him a couple
years.
of, yeah, yeah. His name is Akash Karia, Akash Karia. He said, I was the guy who was too broke to buy a book in 2005. I've now written uh, 16 books. I have a global publishing business, and I speak to corporations like Sony on uh, how to present. I teach people how to,
I looked him up as you spelled out his name. Oh my gosh. This guy?
yeah, yeah. And he said, that was the most important piece of information I ever got. So
Oh,
uh, here's the thing, whatever it is that you want to do, for example, write a book, just do a little bit today and a little bit tomorrow, and give it your best. And that's the recipe.
I've got his website right in front of me. His book is The Science of High Performing Teams. At least that's his most recent book. It sounds like he's written quite a few.
Yeah, he's done 16, or when he wrote to me, when he sent me the email, I think it was 16 books. But he's got a global corporate training business now.
Holy cow. It is amazing what look at all of this. His clients are FedEx, Amazon, the Dubai Knowledge, and then something I can't read because it's in a different language. This is incredible. Oh, I hope that if you're listening to this, by the way, that if you take maybe that one page, one piece of take a page, write a page every day, that's something that whatever that one thing is that has hit you personally, that you do it. Because many of us, I'm sure Andrew's part of this group as well, we pay 5 figures, 6 figures for someone to tell us these things. And sometimes then we take them seriously. But if we can take seriously the intuition that you're receiving right now to follow whatever, oh my gosh, that sounds like a good idea. Oh, maybe I should do that thing. Or maybe that's a gold nugget. Do it and watch what happens. Oh, I'm blown away. I'm absolutely blown away by that. Andrew, so you've been through all of this, and I wanted to get more into your story, but maybe we just need a part 2 of that, of what made you do this and the story of your son. Let me ask you this. What is your altruistic goal? What is it that you see? What is on your vision board still that you haven't accomplished that you want to?
Well, I continue to want to give people hope. When I began writing Being Happy, and my goal with each of my last 12 books is that my readers will pick up this book and say, I now have more hope for a better life, and I see that it is within my grasp. It's something I can do. So that's my major mission. My immediate mission is I wrote a book called Being a Happy Teenager in 2001, which was popular at the time, but a lot has changed in the teenage landscape. And
And
so
that's
I've spent
truth.
the last 6 months rewriting that book and addressing issues like online safety, sexting, sextortion, gaming, drugs, fentanyl. And that book is just about ready for the printers. And so my immediate aim is to get the new version, the 2025 version of Being a Happy Teenager, into the hands of teenagers and give them more hope.
Well, I hope that you do that sooner rather than later, and whatever resources I can provide to hurry up that journey, I want to because I'm raising teenagers. Those wait, when did you say the first one came out? 2001?
First one, yeah, 2001, and so I've just about finished. I've been through the editing phases of the 2025 version, and I drew an extra 50 cartoons for the new version and pulled out a few that were inappropriate or dated, and so it should be going into print. I usually launch all my books in Southeast Asia, even though I live in Australia. I always we've had such a huge readership across Southeast Asia and it's quicker to launch books in places like Singapore, Malaysia, Philippines, uh, than Australia's a huge country, and so um, probably we'll begin launching the hard copy versions of that within the next couple of months there.
Oh, well, I wanna be on a front row seat for that and learn from you and watch how that goes because, for 2 reasons. 1, that's a goal that I think many of my students, myself included, would like to have achieved is to do a book launch to that scale and reach more people, especially so far away from us here. But number 2, and maybe this is more important, is to deliver the kind of impact that you're delivering. Because everyone that was a teenager in 2001 when you wrote your book, they're not teenagers anymore. And with the teenagers that are alive now are, like you said, they're dealing with different things. They're fighting battles that you and I didn't have to fight as teenagers. They're interfacing with tools and technology that it's no longer something that has to be sought out. It's seeking out our kids and it's
Yes.
coming after us, right?
Yeah,
So I,
yeah,
for one, am
that's
happy that you're
exactly
doing
right.
that. So Andrew, let me ask you this as we wrap up. How do people, other than we're going to put all the links that you've sent me, I want to put those in the show notes. But if people really want to get a hold of you and interface with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
So I have a website, andrewmatthews.com, and that's all one word, and Matthews has two T's. Um, so I have a newsletter which comes out every 2 weeks. It's very brief and it has a cartoon. So if you would like a little joy in your mailbox every 2 weeks, you can subscribe at my website. And if you become too happy, you can unsubscribe at any time. Um, I all of my books are on Amazon in hard copy and in ebook. So Bouncing Back or Follow Your Heart, Being Happy. If you like your audiobooks delivered with an Australian accent, then Bouncing Back and Follow Your Heart, I've just finished narrating those. So they're
Oh,
available.
beautiful.
Mm. And um, and I have lots of videos on YouTube and TikTok and Facebook. Mm.
Well, I'm gonna go subscribe to your newsletter. I might even feed my kids' email addresses in there so they get that boost as well.
Sure,
I might
please.
spam my kids. Uh, Andrew, thank you. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for waking up at 3 in the morning, maybe probably even 2, so you could get everything set up and ready. But thank you for spending that time with us. I'm a big proponent of what you're doing, a big proponent of your message. When your book comes out, I want to get behind it. I want to do everything I can to promote it because I believe the impact that you're bringing to the planet, and I say planet on a global scale, will reach people that will never meet you face to face, but maybe even their lives may be saved because you were willing to go through what you went through to put it out there.
It's
So
my pleasure, Marianne. Thank you so much.
you have my gratitude. You have my gratitude. Friends, I'm going to put
Thank
all
you.
the links in the show notes. I'll link the Amazon. Andrew has been so generous with everything that he's putting out there with his fun cartoons, with his joy, his laughter, his resilience. And I if this has spoken to you in any way, take note and take action. If someone's name has come to mind while you've been listening to this episode, that means they're praying for what you just got. And it's your job to send it to them. So send this episode if their name came up. If someone sent you this episode, it means they're praying for you and they're hearing your prayers and they had you in their mind and in their heart. So send them a piece of gratitude for getting this over to you. That's it for this episode of the Marianne Hickman Show. Thank you for being here, Andrew. Thank you for being here if you're listening, and we'll see you in the next episode. Hey, what's up? Marianne Hickman here. Hey, listen, I hope you enjoyed that episode. We have some pretty amazing speakers on my podcast, and of course, more to come. If this is something that you enjoyed, guys, smash the like button, smash the subscribe button. You guys know what to do. I love your comments, and I respond to every single one of them personally, not a bot or an agency. So if this is something you're enjoying, tell me about it. Tell me your gold nuggets. I want to hear from you. But here's the most important thing I want you to laser in on. I told you about the podcast database. You've probably seen me post about it all over social media. I want to make sure that you get it. So here's what I want you to do. Go to mariannehickman.com/database. Once you put all of your information in there, I'm going to send you the document. You request access to it. Boom, it's unlocked. Once you're in there, my rule of thumb is to apply to 10 podcasts a month. It's very digestible. It's very easy to do. And the database gets updated twice a week. So I want you constantly checking back in there for the next podcast that fits your audience. Thank you for being here. Much love to you, and we'll see you in the next episode.